That night, at 3 in the morning, the entire headquarters of the State Security Department in Pyongyang was placed on high alert. My hands still remember the trembling from that moment. For 25 years, I worked inside the State Security Department, interrogating, monitoring, and controlling countless people. And in the end, I made the same choice as the very people I once pursued. No, it wasn't a choice. It was the only path left. My name is Kim Chol-soo. I was a lieutenant general in the Ministry of State Security, responsible for internal intelligence collection and cracking down on so-called anti-state elements. Under the absolute trust of Comrade Kim Jong-un, I served as one of the regime's blades meant to protect the system. And yet here I am now speaking to you from Seoul, South Korea. Before I begin this story, I have one request. Please subscribe and hit the like button. Your engagement helps this video reach more people through the algorithm, revealing the truth about North Korea. That is the last act of resistance I can offer. In the fall of 2023, Pyongyang was as quiet as ever. At 6 in the morning, revolutionary songs blared from the loudspeakers, and people on their way to work bowed before the portraits of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. The streets were clean, orderly, perfect. But I, more than anyone, knew what hid behind that order. My office was on the 6th floor of the State Security Department headquarters. The Pyongyang skyline outside the window was always silent, but on my desk, stacks of reports piled up every day. Smuggling, watching illegal foreign videos, critical remarks about the regime, attempts to flee the country. I read everything, judged everything, gave out orders based on everything. My signature could change someone's entire fate. Ever since that one particular day, I have not been able to sleep deeply again. In March of 2015, my day always started at 5 in the morning. My home was a modest 40-pyong apartment on the 12th floor of a cadre housing building in Pyongyang's central district. In North Korea, living in such a building was considered a privilege. Running water, relatively stable electricity, but every privilege had its price. At 6 in the morning, the loudspeakers in the hallway played revolutionary songs. Grace of the General, our leader, and others. We couldn't lower the volume or turn them off. The party's voice penetrated every home. My wife attended an Inman band meeting at 7. 3 times a week, residents gathered to conduct mutual criticism and lifestyle reports. Comrade Kim's lights were on late at night. Comrade Park misquoted the marshal's teaching. Trivial matters, but all recorded. Even as a high-ranking officer in state security, my family was not exempt. If anything, we were monitored more strictly. We were expected to be the model family of the system. Every day, my desk filled with reports, CCTV analysis, wiretap transcripts, informant statements. Hundreds of cameras monitored Pyongyang's major areas. Kim Il-sung Square, Mendroads markets. We watched everything. One day, a report caught my eye. A lecturer at Pyongyang Teachers University had allegedly commented on the limitations of socialist planned economy during a class. Just one sentence. But that one sentence changed his entire life. I signed the investigation order. My signature sealed his fate. 2 days later, he and his entire family were taken to a political prison camp. My son was 15 at the time, preparing to enter Kim Il-sung University. One evening, he asked me quietly, "Father, is China really poorer than us?" My heart nearly stopped. But as a state security officer, I had mastered my facial expressions. "Who told you that?" "No one at school. They said China is at risk of capitalist restoration." I was just curious. Curiosity. In North Korea, curiosity itself was dangerous. Never think such things again. Our country, guided by our marshal, is the greatest nation in the world. I sounded exactly like the people I used to interrogate. That night, I couldn't sleep. In my office drawer were dozens of confiscated USB drives. Korean dramas, movies, variety shows. Officially, I had to inspect them for evidence. But every time I watched them, I felt an unfamiliar emotion. Envy. The laughter, the freedom, the abundance in those videos felt foreign, yet painfully desirable. In North Korea, questions were crimes. Doubt was treason. Curiosity was danger. And slowly, something inside me began to crack. In the spring of 2017, I went on a business trip to Dandong, China. As a state security officer, I was tasked with inspecting border security. The trip lasted only 3 days. But those 3 days changed my life forever. China was unbelievable. Skyscrapers, neon lights, endless cars. People laughing freely, talking freely, sitting in cafes with laptops. Talking on phones without fear. Across the Yalu River, North Korea was pitch black. Except for Pyongyang, the country disappeared into darkness every night. But Dandong shone like daytime. A colonel traveling with me read a Chinese newspaper and said, Comrade, look at this South Korea's economic growth. I cut him off. Don't read enemy propaganda. But my eyes had already seen the numbers. Per capita income, exports, technology. Everything was incomparable. After returning to Pyongyang, I was no longer the same. Or rather, my eyes had opened. That summer, a report arrived on my desk. 12 people in Chongjin had been arrested for listening to illegal radio broadcasts. Free Asia Radio, KBS World Radio. Ordinary people. Mothers, factory workers, students. And I wondered if Resitrin, what were they listening to? What truth had they risked their lives for? That night, I committed the first crime of my life. I took one of the confiscated radios home. A small portable one. I locked myself in the bathroom, turned on the faucet to mask any sound, inserted the batteries and put in the earphones. My hands trembled. For 25 years, I had arrested people for doing exactly this. I tuned the dial. Static. Suriname, more static. And then, this is Radio Free Asia. To our brothers and sisters in North Korea, my breath caught. My heart pounded violently. But I couldn't remove the earphones. Today we share the story of a defector who escaped the North and rebuilt life in South Korea. I listened for 2 hours. Stories of defectors. Stories of freedom. Stories of a world outside the walls of lies. The next day I bowed before the portraits of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, as always. But inside me something had shattered. I began listening every night. Lights off, locked in the bathroom, ear pressed to the speaker, terrified yet unable to stop. Once a man learns the truth, he cannot return to ignorance. At a meeting, a colonel reported, illegal information is spreading even among officials. A chill ran down my spine, but my face remained calm. Crack down harder, I said, even as my heart screamed the opposite. In North Korea, truth is a crime. Knowledge is danger. But I already knew too much. And it pushed me toward a crossroads I could no longer avoid. In August 2023, my name appeared on an internal investigation list. That morning, my direct superior summoned me. Comrade Kim, you're aware of the anti-corruption campaign underway, yes? I nodded. And in that moment, I understood. My time was running out. Kim Jong-un's anti-corruption drive in the 2020s was, on the surface, about removing corrupt officials. But in reality, it was a purge, a restructuring of power. Anyone whose loyalty was questioned was being eliminated and replaced by a new generation. And the reason I had become a target was clear. During my business trip to China the previous year, I had purchased some electronics through a local broker, simple gifts for my family. In North Korea, even that could be framed as illegal foreign currency activity. But there was an even greater problem. Several cases I had handled recently were deemed too lenient. And it was true. I had intentionally begun lowering the severity of punishments. Instead of sending people to political prison camps, I recommended labor re-education. Instead of death sentences, I suggested life imprisonment. It was my last act of conscience. But the State Security Department interpreted it as ideological weakness. I had to choose. Wait to be purged or survive. That night, I began planning my escape. Choosing the escape route. To escape North Korea, one must cross either the Tumen or the Yalu River, and then reach China. In my office were detailed maps of the border regions and classified security deployment documents. Late at night, alone, I studied those maps. It was the last time I would have legal access to them. Between Yunduk County and Onsong County in North Hamgyong Province, there was a section of the upper Tumen River where security was relatively weak. The terrain was rugged and mountainous. So few defectors attempted it. But that also meant fewer guards. I memorized the map. I couldn't copy it or photograph it. Everything had to rely on memory. The problem of money. Escaping North Korea requires money. Bribes for border guards. Money to hide in China. Fees for brokers. At least $10,000. Fortunately, as a state security officer, I had accumulated foreign currency over the years. Renminbi and dollars exchanged in small amounts during trips to China, and cash taken from smugglers and never reported. It was ironic. I would escape using the very money I had confiscated from the criminals I once arrested. The most painful issue, my family. The third problem was the most painful, my family. One evening, I saw my wife and son watching an animated program on Korean Central Television, laughing. A normal scene. But to me, it looked like a scene I might never see again. I couldn't take them with me. 3 people escaping together had a very low chance of success. If we were caught, We would all be sent to a political prison camp. Even worse, North Korea practices guilt by association. If I disappeared, they would be punished anyway, expelled from Pyongyang, forced relocation, perhaps even imprisonment. But if I were purged, they would suffer regardless. If I survived and reached South Korea, there might someday be a path to save them. I quietly prepared a small backpack, a change of clothes, a Chinese SIM card I had secretly taken from a confiscated item, and my entire life savings $8,000. The atmosphere around me grew tense. Colleagues' glances shifted. Questions during meetings sharpened. On September 15, 2023, I volunteered for a business trip to North Hamgyong province. Border security needs inspection. My superior looked at me suspiciously, but a lieutenant general's request was rarely denied. Everything was ready. Only execution remained. Before leaving Pyongyang, I looked up at the sky. Gray, heavy clouds. One decision would change everything. On the night of September 21st, 2023 at 11 p.m., I stood at the edge of the Tumen River. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds. Darkness lay everywhere. Luck was on my side. The darker the night, the better my chances. But the fear was deeper as well. I had arrived on official business. During the day, I inspected the border guards and wrote a report. No one suspected anything. I was a lieutenant general of state security. At the 6 p.m., I told the border unit commander, I will personally inspect tonight's patrol. Alone. He looked surprised but couldn't object. A lieutenant general's orders were absolute. I won't need a radio. Noise could disrupt discipline. The authority I had built over 25 years was now my last shield. At 10 p.m., I left the barracks with only a small backpack. Guards saluted. I nodded and walked into the darkness. For an hour I walked, following the route I had memorized earlier that day. Then I heard it, the roar of water. My heartbeat was louder. The river was higher than expected. Recent rains had raised the water level. The current was swift, black, violent. 200 meters to my left, a guard post glowed faintly. But I had chosen a blind spot, a flaw I myself had once designed. I stripped off my clothes, wrapped my backpack in several layers of plastic, and placed my clothes inside. I stepped into the river, ice cold. The kind of cold that stabs bones. But I had no time to hesitate. The water rose to my waist, my chest, my neck. The current threatened to pull me under. Holding the backpack above my head, I moved forward. Then, a sharp beam swept across the river, a searchlight. I instinctively submerged myself. Cold water covered my face. I held my breath. The beam passed inches above my head. 3 seconds, 4, 5. It felt like eternity. When the light moved away, I lifted my head slowly and breathed. I kept going. At the center of the river, the water reached my neck. I searched for the riverbed with my toes, inch by inch. Then, who goes there? Gunfire erupted. Bang, bang, bang. Water exploded beside me. I plunged underwater. Freezing water rushed into my nose and mouth, but I refused to stop. I let the current carry me, while kicking toward the far bank. My lungs burned, my limbs numbed, my vision dimmed, but I kept moving. The gunfire continued. Searchlights thrashed wildly across the water, but the darkness and the swift current protected me. I don't know how long it was. 10 minutes? 15? Finally, my hand touched something solid. A stone. The riverbank. China. I crawled onto the shore and collapsed. My entire body shook uncontrollably. From fear, cold, exhaustion, but I was alive. After 25 years of guarding that river, I had finally crossed it myself. I did not look back. I couldn't. On my first morning in China, I woke up on the dirt floor of a barn. My entire body ached. Every muscle felt torn, and yet the most unbearable pain was fear. I had escaped North Korea, but China was not safe. China arrests defectors and forcibly repatriates them to North Korea. If I were caught by Chinese police, I would be sent back. And there, public execution awaited me. I stepped out of the barn and surveyed my surroundings. A small rural village. Morning fog hung low. Dogs barked in the distance. It was an ordinary morning. But for me, it was a fight for survival. Smells filled the air. Livestock, soil, and cooking food. Sense of abundance. I had never experienced in North Korea, but I had no time to enjoy them. Inside my backpack were or Marthashan Distugurin, 5,000 U.S. dollars, and a Chinese SIM card, confiscated once from a smuggler and secretly kept. I walked along a road leading out of the village. My destination, Shenyang. I knew there were brokers there. I had investigated their networks myself, countless times. At a bus stop, I boarded a bus to Shenyang. My hands trembled as I paid the driver. He didn't notice. People in the bus chatted freely, laughed, looked at their phones. To me, or Mamala Tomtun, all that freedom was surreal. I stared out the window and saw China's vast landscapes, farms, factories, apartment complexes. Everything looked wealthier than North Korea. But fear blurred everything. When I arrived in Shenyang at 3 p.m., the city overwhelmed me. Skyscrapers, crowds, cars rushing by. I hid among them. I found an internet cafe. For 20 yen, I rented a computer. My hands trembled on the keyboard. For the first time in my life, I opened Google and typed help for North Korean defectors. Hundreds of results appeared. Most were suspicious. Scams, traps by Chinese police, or unreliable information. But one result stood out. An international human rights organization known for rescuing North Korean defectors. I wrote down their emergency number. Leaving the cafe, I bought a prepaid phone from a convenience store. In a quiet alley, I inserted the SIM card and made the call. Ring. Ring. Wearing. Within a Martian. Hello? In Korean. Tears filled my eyes. I am a North Korean defector. My voice trembled. All the composure I had built over 25 years as a security officer collapsed. It's okay. Speak slowly. Where are you right now? I explained. Come to the address I send you at Tentapuaring P. Suana and for me. Tonight. It's a safe house. I wrote down the address. A small residential home on the outskirts of Shenyang. I spent the evening wandering the streets. I couldn't risk staying anywhere. Hotels required ID. My accent could betray me. I sat on a park bench. Cold autumn air seeped into my bones. Families strolled by. Lovers talked. Children laughed. Such ordinary scenes felt impossibly distant to me. Suddenly, sirens. A police car approached. I ducked behind a tree, my heart pounding. The police car passed, but my heart did not calm. At 9 p.m., I headed toward the safe house. I took a taxi but got off a block away. The neighborhood was dim. Quiet houses lined the street. I found the address. A small 2-story home. I knocked. Footsteps approached. The door opened. A Korean man in his 40s stood there. Come in. You're safe here. At those words, my legs weakened. For the first time since crossing the river, I felt like I could breathe. But real freedom was still far away. The 1 week I spent in the safe house felt both long and short. Inside were 6 other defectors, a housewife from Hamgyong province, a market vendor from Hesan, a miner from Musan, a school teacher from Pyongyang. Different backgrounds, different stories. But one dream, South Korea. The safe house manager, Pastor Kim, was a defector himself. He had escaped in the early 2000s, settled in South Korea, and then returned to China to help others escape. This path is dangerous, he said, but it's the only path. He laid out the escape routes, the Mongolian desert route, the Southeast Asia route. For someone like you, a lieutenant general of state security, North Korea will mobilize everything to find you. Chinese police will already have your information. He was right. My defection wasn't ordinary. A senior security officer escaping was a serious blow to the regime. You must go through Southeast Asia, through Thailand, and then to the South Korean embassy. The plan, a forged passport, a flight from Kunming to Chiang Mai, then a trip to Bangkok to reach the South Korean embassy. The cost is $8,000, everything I had, but I didn't hesitate. And 2 days later, I received the passport, a Chinese businessman identity. In the photo, I barely recognized myself. Short hair, glasses, a business suit. Act, Pastor Kim said. You are no longer a North Korean officer. After a week of preparation, the departure day arrived. October 2nd, 2023. Pastor Kim drove me 15 hours to Kunming. We spoke along the way. Do you regret it? I asked. Regret what? He replied. Returning to danger. You could have lived safely in South Korea. He smiled. Someone helped me escape once. Now it's my turn. We reached the airport, Kunming Changshui International Airport. Crowded, bright, massive. From here on, you're on your own. Be careful. We shook hands. I walked into the airport. At the check-in counter, I handed over my passport. The agent scanned it, looked at the screen. My heart pounded. Window seat? She asked casually. I nodded. I went through security. Bag through the X-ray. Shoes off. Metal detector. Every beep, every glance. Felt like interrogation. But no one stopped me. I boarded the plane, fastened the seatbelt, looked out the window. China below me. North Korea far behind. 3 hours later, the plane landed in Chiang Mai. Immigration. Another passport inspection. Purpose of visit? Tourism. How long will you stay? 1 week. The officer stamped the passport. Enjoy your trip. I exhaled. I had entered Thailand. The next day, I traveled to Bangkok, then took a taxi to the South Korean embassy. Standing in front of the gate, I froze. Beyond that gate was a new life, a point of no return. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. A security guard approached. What brings you here? My voice trembled. I'm from North Korea. I am here to request protection. It was over. And everything was just beginning. On October 15th, 2023, I arrived at Incheon International Airport. The moment I stepped onto South Korean soil, tears streamed down my face. I had lived 50 years, but it was the first time I cried for freedom. After submitting my protection request, I stayed in Bangkok for a week while verification took place. Because I was a high-ranking security officer, South Korea's National Intelligence Service sent personnel to conduct interviews. Comrade Kim, no, Mr. Kim Chul-soo. Welcome to the Republic of Korea. It was the first time anyone called me Mr., not comrade. That simple change symbolized a world I had never known. Walking through the airport, I looked around. Bright lights, clean floors, people moving freely, completely different from Pyongyang Sunan Airport. I was taken to Hanwon, the resettlement center for North Korean defectors. 3 months of education on how to live in South Korea. That night, alone in my room, I cried. I didn't know if it was joy or grief. I had gained freedom, but lost everything. My family, my rank, my identity. Hanwon taught me everything anew. How to open a bank account, how to take a bus, how to shop at a convenience store. A 50-year-old man learning like a 5-year-old child. But the hardest lesson was freedom itself. At the cafeteria, what would you like for lunch? The staff asked. I froze. In North Korea, you don't choose food. You eat what you're given. Can I choose anything? Of course, anything. The word felt foreign. One day, an instructor pulled me aside. Because of your background, your identity must be protected. It could be dangerous. If people know you were a state security general, I understood. North Korea would never forget me. Retribution could come. But I made my choice. Thank you. But I don't want to hide. I want to tell the truth. In January 2024, I completed Hanwon and settled in Seoul. The government provided a small studio apartment, less than Subipyeong, but freer than any apartment in Pyongyang. I opened the window. Seoul's air entered my room. Cars, voices, everyday sounds. To me, it sounded like peace. I went to a convenience store. It was open 24 hours. Hundreds of items on the shelves. Return and a pretty firm. More than Pyongyang's department stores. I went to a bookstore. With furniture. Thousands of books. No forbidden titles. I picked up a book criticizing Kim Jong-un. No alarms. No arrests. No surveillance. My hands trembled. In North Korea, touching that book would mean a political prison camp. Here, it meant nothing. I sat in a cafe. People spoke freely about politics, celebrities, work. At the next table, university students criticized the president openly. This government is hopeless. I'm not voting for them next time. I stared at them. They criticized their leader without fear. No one dragged them away. That one was freedom. At night, I thought of my family, my wife, my son. Were they safe? Were they punished? Guilt weighed heavily, heavier than joy. But I will not give up. Someday, I will find a way to reunite with them. Today, I work with organizations helping North Korean defectors. The knowledge and experience I once used to maintain a dictatorship now help others escape it. A cruel irony. The guardian of a regime, now exposing its truth. Freedom is not free. I lost everything to gain it, but I do not regret it. In North Korea, questions were crimes. In South Korea, conversation is freedom. In North Korea, choices didn't exist. Here, I choose my own life. In North Korea, truth was forbidden. Here, I speak it. Being able to share this story with you, that is freedom. After 50 years, I am finally living my own life. And right now, I am breathing with you. Thank you.